All right, our guest today is going to share a unique perspective on a way that recreation can meet agriculture. And it happens more often than we think as far as recreation meeting agriculture, but we also have a lot of our listeners involved in this side of recreation, and we're talking hunting. So pleased to have Sean Ferbrache here. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the American Hunting Lease Association. But I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about what he does. Welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Well, thank you, Tanner. I appreciate it. I appreciate you asking to have me today. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, so what do you got going on down there? What do you do for a day?
Well, I spend most of my days and most of my time speaking with landowners and hunters about how they can arrange a hunting lease or a way to access private property that makes the landowners a little money and gives hunters access to property they probably wouldn't have otherwise. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And we've been in business now since 2010. And yeah, we've become, I dare say, one of the thought leaders in this space. So we get a lot of folks looking towards us or for us to just kind of guide them through this. Like we're talking with landowners that own considerable amount of land in some cases, and that's a lot of assets, and they want to make sure if they're going to allow access that they do it right, and that's where we can help them.
So yeah, we're Farm for Profit Podcast, and our listeners listen to us because they are always looking for ways to increase profitability. And that might be by utilizing or putting to use underutilized assets, such as ground that could be used for hunting. So the company that you're talking about is called Camp Leasing. So what essentially does Camp do for our listeners?
So Camp Leasing is a hunting lease broker. Started by a gentleman named Steve Ming back in 2000. Moved to Indiana from Kansas, didn't have a place to hunt. Decided to take the model really from Texas and Louisiana that's been around for nearly 100 years and just kind of bring it to the Midwest. So what Camp Leasing does is they go to landowners and they try and secure property and land that the landowners have into their program. They have 65,000, 70,000 hunters in their pool that are looking for a place to hunt.
Wow.
What Camp does is, though, they're a service company. So they will not only send a rep out to your property to kind of give it a once-over, to evaluate the market value for hunting and what hunters will pay. And, if, we're always asked, how much can I expect to charge or to make? Depends. You guys are in Iowa. It's a great place to hunt, but since the state of Iowa kind of restricts hunters, Missouri is a better place. The property value is just a little higher for leasing in Missouri because the tags are over the counter. I can come from Indiana and hunt there. So what Camp will do is they'll come out, they'll take pictures, they'll evaluate your property, they'll sit down with the landowners and explain to them exactly how this works, what they should expect, and then, of course, what kind of revenue they can generate. They also provide a $5 million liability policy that protects the landowners from any kind of liability. It's a huge component. And then they do all the legwork. They have a contract that's been reviewed by attorneys for over 20 years and approved. So they have an ironclad contract that favors the landowner probably a little bit, but is also very favorable to the hunter. So they're just the gold standard when it comes to hunting lease brokers and actually finding a place to hunt.
Yeah, so this is all encompassing. I mean, I knew what to expect, but that's a full package. So if a listener wants to go about this without having much knowledge at all, Camp's the company that can help take you from start all the way through finish and continue to build multi-year relationships.
Absolutely. Like I said, they're just the gold standard. So, and they're a service group. So, they're not just going to sign up a landowner and say, well, there you go, you're on your own. They'll really work with landowners. One of the things I don't think they realized was when you lease what's called a traditional lease, you're not leasing the land. There's no promise of tenancy or anything past accessing your land. So you're really just leasing hunting rights or access.
Right.
So you're giving up no rights, whatsoever. So they'll do a nice job. Sometimes the landowners will say, hey, I need to log this 20 acres or I'm going to take this particular wood line out. That's not a problem. They go back through Base Camp. Base Camp can readjust, make sure the hunters are aware, and then make any adjustments on the fly. So they're a full service group. And when I first started here, I was asked by my friends, there's a whole industry around hunting and hunting leases? Yeah, there really is. And, there's tens of thousands of landowners taking part in this, hundreds of thousands of hunters. So it's buttoned up industry for sure. And like I said, Basecamp just at the forefront.
My mind is just exploding right now with more questions. But
blame on me.
I don't want to skip over one thing that you mentioned earlier, and that was liability coverage. So I'm such narrow-tracked mind as we record this podcast. I didn't think about that as being an essential. But when you're talking a group of hunters and they're on your property, that's probably really important to the landowner to make sure that they're covered and protected.
Of course it is. And, as a hunter, I feel like I have to say, hunting is one of the safer recreational activities we have. It's proven. But if you're a landowner and you're charging a fee, you're accepting payment for access, that throws you into a bit of a different level of responsibility. And so, and again, either American Hunting or Basecamp can walk a landowner through, here's what you should do. Take a ride around your property. If you're an absentee landowner, have somebody take a look around it. Let's mark it. Let's post it. Let's make maps. Because we want it to be as safe as possible, obviously.
Right.
But you don't want anybody out there accidentally injuring themselves or, frankly, creating any kind of property damage accidentally, which we've had irrigation pumps and equipment accidentally shot. And so the landowner has some recourse. The liability policy goes both ways. It protects the landowner and the hunters. So any type of property damage or personal injury caused to the other accidentally is a reason to file a claim.
Right, absolutely. Well, that's good. That's good to know that there are protections in place. I mean, you'd like to trust everybody, but just like you said, you fall into a different category when money exchanges hands. It becomes more of a business relationship, and we want our listeners to be protected. But if I've got a listener that's interested in this, where is Basecamp operating out of? Do you cover all the states, or is it kind of a limited territory?
Well, Basecamp's in 25 states, I believe now, with about 30 different agents in the country, mostly in the Midwest, really starting to expand into the South. New York, Maryland, big states for Basecamp. So it's really an expanding company, just I think based on the reputation and what they offer. So, one of the things I think when you talk about you want to trust people, of course you do. And you can trust folks. And the other thing is a lot of landowners, farmers in particular, they'll either work on a handshake because they're generous, caring people, or they will have somebody sign a quick waiver. The problem with the waiver, and I would encourage everybody to sign a waiver in addition to contracts because it's just another level of protection. But your wife didn't sign that waiver. And if there is some sort of catastrophe that happens, and it's rare, but they do happen, where you're left or the hunter is left unable to provide for their family. And now, the wife is faced with trying to raise a family and that might not be, sufficient for her, then she's well within her rights to file a lawsuit, typically. Now, honestly, the injuries we see are almost always somebody falling out of a tree stand that they hung. So there's nobody to blame there except for themselves. So there is no liability there. One thing about liability coverage I tell everybody is it never pays you. It pays somebody else on your behalf. That's what it's for.
Yep, that's right. So any of our listeners with land can participate, but kind of like you said, a lot of our listeners work on handshakes. So do they get the opportunity to actually meet the hunters that are on the opposite end of the lease?
They can. They can ask Basecamp as a stipulation. Typically, Basecamp doesn't do that. They've got a pool of hunters, and they just match the hunters with the landowners. But absolutely, if a landowner said, I want to meet the hunters prior to that, that can all be worked out. And you asked me a little bit ago where they can go. It's basecampleasing.com. It's very simple. And if you want just some generic information on leasing in general, you can go to ahuntinglease.org, which is where the American Hunting Lease lives.
Oh, yeah, that would be helpful. So when you get started, if they go out there and they venture into getting looked up, is there a cost to the landowner? Is there a fee to get started if I own land and want to work with Basecamp?
There is absolutely no fee. All they need to do is reach out through basecampleasing.com or call them on the phone. It's another thing that's fantastic about them is they will answer the phone. They're in Indiana. They'll answer the phone and they will talk to you up front. They'll get an agent scheduled to come out and have a look, or they'll actually have the agent reach out to the landowner directly, and they'll schedule time to come out and walk the property. And if the landowner wants to walk it with them, that'd be great. And then, like I said earlier, they'll sit down and they'll go over everything. But there's no cost. They take a commission once it leases, and that's it. It's extremely simple.
It does. It sounds like it is. Now, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. Just some quick one-off questions that I already got when I floated this around to a couple listeners. But who's responsible for listing the property? So if you come out and walk, I don't have to do anything, correct? You take the photos. You do everything that's necessary to be posted out there for the hunter pool to look at it.
Exactly. So they list it. Base Camp Leasing will list your property for you. They've got certain levels of membership that have first look at new leases, and frankly, it's pretty rare that the good lease goes any further than that. It's funny, they go out to the wall hanger members Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, of which I am a wall hanger member, and I know by the time I get on 15, 20 minutes after the email went out, most of the time a good one's already gone.
So you're kind of at a supply and demand here to where the supply is low and the demand is high.
The supply is almost non-existent and the demand is off the chart. COVID-19 had a lot to do with the increase in hunter numbers. Supply and demand was a little out of whack before the pandemic, and now it's even more so. I read that I think there was like 11 million hunters in 2016. The U.S. Division of Fish and Wildlife does a report every 5 years. They did one in 21, but we haven't seen it yet. And I think there were 39 million licenses sold in the country in 21. Some of that's a duplicate, but the average or the estimate is that it's going to be up somewhere in the 15 to 20% range of new hunters entering the sport, and they need a place to hunt. So if you are a landowner and you have that kind of supply, there's frankly just never been a better time to get maximum value for your land than there is right now.
Right, and being farm for profit, and the whole reason we put this episode together is to find alternative income sources for underutilized assets, and that sounds like this could be a really good fit. But now I'm going to try and relate. I'm relating this to like a rental house. If I lease out a house, I no longer have access to the house. Is that the same way it goes for my ground?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's what I mentioned a little bit ago. You're only leasing out the recreational access or rights to your property. You are a farmer, you're a landowner, and you have full right to do everything you need to do for that land. Whether it's, I need to put cattle out in that pasture, I need to remove that woods, I need to cut firewood. Anything you need to do is, you're absolutely welcome and free to do that. You just have to know that you want your customers or your guests or your lessees to come back year after year. And so you want to make sure you provide a good experience for them. So, let's say you have a family reunion at your farm and you have people out and they're riding ATVs or they're doing whatever it is they do. If you could have that family reunion in the summer and not in October, that would be very welcome, on behalf of hunters. So there's things you can do and there's a balance, but to directly answer your question, you lose absolutely no rights when you lease access to your property.
Okay, so if I end up making a connection some other way or my land sells, is this barring me from terminating a lease? How do I end the relationship with Base Camp if something in my life comes up to where it just needs to be time to be done?
Well, I know I think there's a 30 or 60 day notice when you just want to end the lease. They're a year-long lease. So the leases they do they're traditional. They're for one full year. People do sell. Boy, the last couple of years, the real estate market has been crazy. I've lost my lease in Kentucky. But the landowner, you just call Base Camp, you talk to Base Camp, and they will facilitate or negotiate kind of a peaceful resolution. Sometimes they take a look at like how long was the lease in place? Did it go through deer season, which is 98% of the leases? And they'll talk to both. They'll help you negotiate that exit from the program. And it's typically always very amicable, and they want to keep customers on both sides. They hope as a landowner you see their value and that you come back, and as hunters we want you to hunt with us somewhere. So what can we work out? And like I said, it's almost always amicable after the initial blast of, hey, you can't hunt there anymore. And I have felt that heartache and that kick in the gut. And, it was 2 years ago, and I'm already off to a better place.
Oh, so. I totally get it. I do. Before I switch over to what it's like on the experience side for a hunter, is there anything that we missed to the landowner that you'd like to share about base camp?
Well, I don't think so. I think we really covered it. There are, with the advent of social media, on Facebook, there are some guys doing a little bit of on their own type thing. I would just be leery. The two things that you have to have are you have to have a liability policy in place, and you have to have a tried and true contract. Other than that, there are other avenues, but I just always come back to base camp. Even as a hunter, I go through base camp because I just know everything's taken care of and I can hunt safely and responsibly wherever I choose.
So can you give us any type of a ballpark range as to what a lease would be worth to the landowner?
Sure. Let me be kind of general. As far as the Midwest goes, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, that's probably pretty much everywhere on quality habitat. And the farmer knows. There are no experts like the farmers. They see the deer. I always tell the hunters, I'm always like, hey, don't forget to visit the farmer while you're out there, because he's the person who'll say, oh, you should see this giant, 150 that comes out over here under this oak tree. That's where I'm going to go. They're getting as much as $50 an acre right now on huntable ground. If you own 200 acres and there's 2 acres of woods on it,
right,
you're not going to get 50 times all of it.
Yep.
So, but if you've got quality habitat with some diversity, you can get anywhere between really $30 and $50 an acre, 50 on the high end, 30 on the low end. Depends on the county, the state, all that kind of stuff. So, and the history. I mean, if you've got pictures of some of the bucks that have been taken off of your property, that's just helps them even more so. So, yeah, it can be significant revenue.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So now let's switch to the hunter side, because I know we've got listeners that also enjoy the recreation side. What's that like? What's the experience like if someone wants to go out to base camp and start getting on the waiting list, is what it sounds like?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would join the Wall Hangers Club. I think it's $200 a year, something along those lines. And then you get first look when they sign up new leases, new landowners. They put them out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you get first look at them. You have the exact same chance, the opportunity that everybody else does. So you got to know in the area you're looking for. Like, say I'm looking for Indiana, southern half, 100 acres or more. I look at that every time it comes out, and when I see one come down, I take a look at it. So that's what I would suggest, but it's a free site as well. You can go there right now, and you can look at all of the leases they have. Even the ones that are leased are typically listed without the price and without the location. So, yeah, I think they have allowed me to – I'm a city guy. I'm a retired Indianapolis fireman, and so I'm born and raised in the city. I don't have family that owns land. The prospect of me owning a couple of 100 acres, especially in this market, is really zero. And with the idea of leasing access, I'll never consider owning that kind of a chunk of ground, because for $6,000-$7,000 split 4 or 5 ways with my friends that also hunt, we can hunt some of the best habitat in this country. I know when I go there with my grandson, nobody else is going to be in my tree stand. Nobody else is going to be there. We can hang, and when you lease for a full year, so it's not just deer season. You can hang cameras, you can put out mineral licks, you can shed hunt, you can turkey hunt. It's a recreational lease that allows you to use that property like it was your own for a full year. And we were just talking this morning, I'm getting ready to put up a box blind for the first time ever, but I'm looking forward to it. I talked to my landowner. I said, do you mind? He said, absolutely not. He even said, if you guys want to park your camper out there and camp, you can.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought we were going to do that until I got out there and saw where we would park it. I was like, oh, this is the hub of the whole property. So no, we'll stay off. But yeah, it's just, and now he and I have become friends. And so it's just a win all around, and it allows me to hunt property that I would never be able to hunt.
So that sparked another question. You just mentioned friends. So is there a way to use base camp leasing to make sure all the ducks are in order if a landowner already has connected with a hunter?
Yes. Yeah, you can contact Camp Leasing. I think there are rare instances where a landowner might say, hey, listen, my nephew is already hunting here. I don't want to kick him off. He's going to bring 3 friends. What can we work out? I think, and I don't want to speak for the guys at Camp, but I'm fairly certain that they can work something like that out with you. Awesome.
That's great. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, I'd like for you to close out with contact information, how people can get a hold of Camp, where the best place to get started is at.
Yeah, the first thing I would do is go to basecampleasing.com. Since I'm talking to mostly landowners, there is a landowner portal and a landowner page that will explain their entire program. And then if it just piques your interest a little bit, just give them a call. You can speak to any of the ladies that will answer the phone. They can answer all your questions. If you'd like to speak with one of the managers, you could even ask for one of the managers. They would help you out as well. I don't know their phone number off the top of my head. If you want just information generally on leasing and on how it works, you can reach out to us. It's ahuntinglease.org, our American Hunting Lease Association, 866-782-6330. And that one I do know.
Awesome. And I will stick the phone numbers in the show notes for you listeners, so you don't have to jot them down right now while you're on the road. We will have those and have access. But Sean Ferbrache, I appreciate you joining us and sharing with the listeners here on Farm for Profit another way that they might be able to put their land to work for them.
Hey, I appreciate it. I really like the podcast. I've listened to it a couple of times now since we hooked up, and it's nice. I think a lot of folks probably shortchange farmers that they're actually business people, and because they get their hands dirty doesn't mean they don't understand ROI and alternative revenue streams and operational costs and all those things. So, this is a way we can bring everybody together and kind of educate everyone at the same time and make some money.
Absolutely. We catch that firsthand, knowing that this was one of the topics that they requested. There is certainly business mindset behind each one of these farmers, especially those that are successful. But, Sean, thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a good one.